Please welcome back to the stage Phil Grabsky.
Thank you.
And joining us remotely is Shoaib Sharifi. Welcome.
Hello.
Hi, Shoaib.
Hello.
Congratulations to both of you. I just want to point out before we get started that due to the pandemic ongoing, we are, instead of passing around a mic, we are submitting questions via Slido, and so the code is up there. It's pretty straightforward, but please do get your questions in. I'll begin with a couple questions and then start looking at the audiences. Can you talk about your own collaboration? You've been working on this together for many years, and I understand that it's evolved over the years. So talk about how that has come about.
Okay, I'll start with that. There are obviously a number of people, without whom this film would never have been made, and undoubtedly Shoaib is as important to the film as I am. When I first went to Afghanistan in 2002, initially I worked with an Afghan translator, fixer, local producer on the first film, but unbeknownst to me, Shoaib was actually working in Bamiyan at the same time. Mm-hmm. And only recently did he point out, or notice even, that in one of the shots, in the very beginning of the film, there's a vehicle that comes through, and Shoaib recently said, I'm in that vehicle. It was just a coincidence. What I also didn't know was the footage that I bought of the Buddhas of Bamiyan being destroyed mm-hmm. by the Taliban, which was a very dangerous thing to film. If the Taliban had seen somebody filming, you were likely to be arrested. I bought that footage from Al Jazeera, not knowing that Shoaib was the person that had filmed it. Anyway, we subsequently met by accident in London, and I immediately realized that Shoaib was somebody that I wanted to work with on continuing to film Mia, for a number of reasons, not least because he had actually, again, it was a bizarre coincidence, but he had met the same family, and they had really taken to him, and that proved to be very, very important in terms of that continued access. And, it's not that, when I went to Afghanistan, I assumed I would be making a film about an adult male, thinking that it would be difficult to talk to Afghan women. It wasn't entirely the case, but certainly Shoaib's relationship with the family means that they are completely open mm-hmm. with him in particular. And so the mother, and obviously more recently Shukriya, I think they're such an important part of the film. The other thing to say is that Shoaib has had a parallel, very important career, making films, working for the BBC. He's presented 2 panoramas. He became head of the BBC station in Kabul. He moved his family from London back to Kabul. And so without him living in Kabul and filming when he could, and it's sad that he's not here today. He had the most horrendous journey to get from Kabul to come here, but then en route caught COVID, so he's sitting in quarantine in northwest London. But I don't want to, he's extraordinarily modest and humble, and I'll be embarrassing him, but he's an extraordinary man, Shoaib, and it's extremely risky working in Kabul right now. But he refuses to leave. He's got people working for him, and he's a very, very talented filmmaker. So we're very fortunate.
Well, Shoaib, congratulations on this. Can you talk a bit about your own contact with Mir and his family over the years, and how you go about checking in with them and what that relationship's like?
Yes, affirming a lot of all of what Phil said, and coincidentally, in those early days of just post-Taliban time, I have been also covering the news for mostly humanitarian aspect of what they call it internally, their IDPs, or internally displaced people. And of the at least over 100 caves over there, I have been impressed or bumped into Mia's mother and Mia's father. Interesting, throughout the year or two that each time I've been going to Bamyan, visiting that cave, talking to her, she called me my son, so our relationship developed that way. And so it was a year or so, and then I came to the UK to do my master's, and not knowing that, so finishing my master's degree, and a friend said there's a film being shown in the festival in the Frontline Club, and I go and I'm surprised that sort of my mother, or the woman who I know quite a lot, is on the screen, and then how it started knowing Phil. And I think that bonding, that very early bonding, it wasn't triggered by the film, but we already had a bit of multiple visits, and having from that very non-journalistic relationship, just like she was treating me like I was hers, and that really helped it when I went further, and the access, I was blended in so comfortably in the society because I had the backing of his mother and in the family as well. So I wasn't, I was just a normal person there, and the life would carry on without them feeling that there was a filmmaker in the corner sitting.
And so you would be, I mean, obviously you're very busy working at the BBC in Kabul and doing all your projects. So how would you go about, how often would you be filming? Because I understand, Phil, you haven't actually been there in a while. Shoaib was doing the filming, and then you were collaborating online together to make this film. And you will be in person soon, I think, for the finishing touches. We could see that you were checking in kind of on a yearly basis or doing some filming at least every year with them.
Well,
Yes, it was a lot of trips between a few of the trips we did together with Phil, and maybe once or two, but not multiple times in a year. So what I was doing in early years, it was multiple trips a year, sometimes trying to capture different seasons. Like I would go in the summer and spend at least 15 days and 20 days, and sometimes then go in the winter because things would be different. So traveling, and it has been really difficult in early years because I would have to travel through very difficult terrain, the Salang Pass, around 3,500 meters above sea level, going through the Salang Tunnel, then go to the tarmac, then bumpy road, then it would an early trip sometimes would have been even when the road was blocked, to walk for like hours to reach the village, donkey and other stuff. So it has been really tough in early days. But as by the going of time, so roads were slightly better, but it still was really difficult journey. The good thing was that slowly the village were even expecting me if I were like going late, and they were saying, where are you? So I was like the man with the camera, always okay to be seen in the village filming around, because I had become sort of part of the image of that little village in the bigger picture.
It's really striking, the film. It really shows how dangerous the situation remains, how on the ground people remain completely in fear of the Taliban, and how devastating it's probably going to be with the withdrawal of troops. I've got a question here about sort of danger in general from the audience, from Joanna. How do you feel now, looking back, about your decision to intervene when Mir's family ran out of money and potentially expose him to danger as a cameraman?
So the minute you start filming somebody, you have intervened. Particularly if you then continue and make a film about him and then bring that to cinemas and television stations, and you've made an intervention, and not only so, you have to treat that very responsibly. I have no time for filmmakers who think we have to stay outside of the situation, we can't intervene, what happens happens. I don't believe that. So the question really is, how do you intervene? In this case, Mir, it wasn't us saying to Mir, the story's running out, nothing's happening, how about you become a cameraman?
Right.
He had, in fact, he'd expressed an interest. not surprisingly, you know,
Mm-hmm.
even those very first trips I made to Bamiyan, I have footage of him kind of picking up the camera and playing with it and filming me, and it was part of our bonding, actually. And he showed an interest, and with Schweib, he showed so he genuinely wanted to become a cameraman. Now, we organised, I say we, I mean, it's largely Schweib, organised this internship with Chinar. Now, Chinar do a number of things, as you saw. They cover sports. They cover Afghan's National Football League. But yes, they also try to... I mean, some of the news footage they get is of suicide bombings. Yes, that puts Mir in danger's way. It's awful, frankly, because the trouble with making a film about Afghanistan, and it's not unique to Afghanistan, there's lots of subjects where this must be true, but for me, every day when I get my Google alerts of news from Afghanistan, it is almost always bad. And something happens in Kabul, particularly when it involves the Hazara. I'm on the trying to contact Schweib or Mir directly and say, you know, are you all right? Ultimately, we have to one of the things about this is we have to let Mir follow his own journey. You know, we can't really tell him what he can and can't do. He wants to be a cameraman. He wanted that work. Quite how long-term it is, we can't really judge. But that was a really, really close shave. I mean, you know, 9 journalists were killed, and it was very nearly 10.
I've got a couple questions relating to your decision to make this a longitudinal project. Phil, did you begin the project thinking you would follow your subject for such a long time, and was it always your intention to release the film 20 years after 9/11?
No, not at all. When I went on that first trip, very quickly I realized I thought I would be making a film about an adult male, but the men in Bamiyan were exhausted. They had great stories to tell about the past, but there was nothing happening. They had exhausted, had no work. And cinema, because I wanted to make a cinema film, although we had some funding from Channel 5, so I knew it was going to go to Channel 5 ultimately. But it's all about storytelling, and there was no story. And then I was lucky because I bumped into Mir, and actually one of the very first scenes with Mir was when he took me into the corridors and the stairways behind the Buddhas, the destroyed Buddhas. And all of a sudden there was some energy. I was filming that, and there was some energy in the camera, and I suddenly thought, here's a story. What happens in the first year? What will be accomplished in this first year? Made that film, released it, and it did pretty well, but actually I immediately realized 1 year is not enough. Actually, what happened was that I started doing a lot of festivals like this, and it started winning awards, and I felt really uncomfortable because you got this huge screen of Mir's face, and I had absolutely no way of contacting him. I didn't know whether he was still alive. There was no mobile phones at that point. My fixer, local producer, lived in Islamabad. It was tough for Schweib to get from Kabul. It was even tougher from Islamabad. So I decided to go back, which was a bit of a challenge for me and, you know, my family and people I know, because the very last trip, there'd been the Taliban were supposed to have disappeared, but they hadn't, and we had to run a roadblock, and that was scary. So I thought to myself, I don't want to do this again. But I did go back, and then decided to make a film with Schweib that covered 10 years. I have to say, when we finished 10 years, I was like, okay. And part of it, I've got to be honest, part of it is just the problems of funding. You can't underestimate just how much that has an impact on how a filmmaker works. And it was really difficult getting broadcasters on board. And in 2011, when that film was shown, you know, people were tired of Afghanistan. They didn't want to hear about Afghanistan. So going back to people and say, oh, well, now we want to do something that covers 15 years, maybe even 20 years. Initially, nobody thought that was a good idea. Except, well, 2 commissioning editors at WDR Germany. One who represented Arte and one who represented WDR. They were really, really important. And one's now retired, but the other one, Jutta Krug from WDR, unbelievably important in just supporting us all the way. And of course the relationship with Shuaib. Somehow the head of production and finance, also my wife at Seventh Art, finds the money to just keep this thing going. But there will definitely be a relief when this is finished. And I think that now, of course, the world has changed, so it kind of update, because people are always writing for update. They always want to know what's happening with Mia. But now that can be online. Now Mia can film himself and post things online. We don't necessarily need to we won't make another film about Mia's life, so it can, we can keep track of him. And of course what we hope now, partly because of his age, partly because things have changed, is that Mia can come and do a Q&A with us.
Absolutely, yeah.
That would be nice too.
Yeah, let's hope for that. Shuaib, I'm going to combine two questions here for you, please. What is your opinion of the plans to remove troops from Afghanistan by September 2021, and what needs to happen in Afghanistan for things to improve in the future?
Yeah, I will start with the last question first. Peace needs to happen for things. And what they say, I would say what is reflected on the ground, well, everybody supports withdrawal of troops from Afghanistan. But what they say, there's a term, a responsible exit from Afghanistan. You have been here for 20 years now, but you cannot just wrap up and go. You have to make sure that this country does not collapse into further chaos. The ground is paved, and then you should leave. So that's my opinion as well, that obviously eventually the last 20 years of foreign troops were here, but now that they're leaving, it has to be a well calculated, well measured, responsible exit from Afghanistan, so that it leads to a long-term stability and peace.
I'm going to ask you, Phil, I know that you mentioned that you had several members of the production here. Do you want to point out who's here? And
they might be embarrassed if I do that, but I mean,
too late. Come on.
I mean, Asa's here, who is the composer for this film. There is some music from the previous composer. Asa's somebody that we work with on. I mean, the thing that Seventh Art does as well is we make art films for the cinema series exhibition on screen, and Asa does a lot of the soundtracks. I mean, a soundtrack is so important. I mean, you take away the music from this film, and it's something else completely. And I'll embarrass him by saying I think he's a genius. It's so hard to do. And for me, I mean, it's the first time I've seen it on the big screen, and I've just it's just, my stomach's turning over, not from a filmmaking point of view, but just because I just find it so sad that this small family, which is just like all of us, they just want to be left alone, they just want to go out to the park, go to picnics. She just wants to go out and work, and they just can't, because a few thousand individuals, which we broadly call the Taliban, and of course it is more complicated than that, have these weapons of destruction which they're quite happy to use, and it's so sad. And the music has to kind of reflect that. Obviously, no film is made without a kind of a whole team behind it. And I have one person who's not here who's just responsible for clearing footage, for doing all the credits. I mean, all those kind of things take so much time. Very significantly, really, really important. I mean, it was vital. As important as me is the editor, Clive, who also can't be here. But you can imagine with the amount of footage that was coming back, and in a language that he clearly doesn't speak.
I wanted to ask you how difficult the edit was, and how you've got lots of different things balls that you're juggling in the air, including Mir's voice, the archive footage, which is telling this whole story, and 20 years of your own footage.
We have the advantage of a clear chronology. So you have the advantage of an individual growing up. And so you see him aging, and you can see what's happening to him. But again, you run the risk of it being very episodic. And if I'm honest, the second film, which I'm proud of, but felt a little episodic in some ways. So you've got these two kind of stories going on. You've got him growing up. What's important? We have filmed a lot of material. So which scenes do we include, and how much of those scenes? But then what we also wanted to do with this film, more than the previous two films, was contextualize it. So that, it is not my job to tell you what to think. Our jobs as filmmakers is to inform you, to help you make your own decision. I have an opinion. And certainly my view of Afghanistan is that there's nothing black and white about it. It's shades of grey. And that nor can you take a short-term view on it. Whatever you think of the British as colonialists, they didn't go into a country thinking they'll only be there for 5 years or 10 years and they can sort it out. They knew these things take 50 years. And part of the problem in Afghanistan was the idea that we can sort this out in 5 years and leave. It was never possible. And the amount of money, the amount of people that have been damaged, killed, injured, but also the amount of money that's been spent is just extraordinary, and not enough of that was on aid and long-term projects. Slightly lost my train of thought now. What was the question?
Well, it was about editing, but
editing, sorry. So the editing, so we wanted to contextualize it so that you could watch the film, and in 90 minutes, if you knew very little about Afghanistan, which is probably unlikely, for who will come to see a film like this, probably knows something about Afghanistan or has an interest already, I guess. But if we get people in to watch, through our marketing, through the poster, through whatever, if we can get people to watch who know very little, we have to scour all these news items and pick out the right bits of news at the right time. It would be very easy to have, there's quite a lot of suicide bombings, because if we didn't have that, we didn't have these attacks, it would be unfair. But we also wanted to make it clear that one of the things that Afghans are really desperately upset by, and it doesn't really get enough news coverage here, is the amount of civilian deaths from both sides. It's all very well for the Allies to say, we were targeting a Taliban, but if they get it wrong and hit a hospital, or even if they hit the target but there's 7 other people killed, that's very damaging in lots of ways. But also what we wanted to show was that there has been development. I get frustrated when I watch, say, Question Time, and a politician will be on there saying it's been a complete waste of time, or a journalist, complete waste of time, should never have gone in. That also isn't true, and that's something that Shuaib will talk to, or can talk to. Afghanistan now is a better place than it was 20 years ago. The sadness is that it could and should have been much better.
A lot better. Shuaib, we have to wrap up in a minute, but can I just ask you, and I know that you work often in shorter form news formats, Panorama and that thing, so what are your hopes for this long form documentary in terms of people's understanding of Afghanistan and affecting what's happening in Afghanistan?
Sure. Well, I hope it will tell a better story like Afghanistan, the unknown country, the other side of Afghanistan. But I also hope that people, putting Afghanistan and politics aside, they look also at a different angle of more of a human story of a little boy, 7, growing up, becoming 27. The love and affection of the parents that has in fact affected me, inspired me, even if the parents living in a cave, whatever destitute the condition they are, the hopes and the high aspirations they have for their little boy, and growing up, and the story of resilience of human being, all of us, how if we are into difficult conditions, how much we really fight and carry on life throughout a lot of difficulties. So I would say, I hope alongside the Afghanistan story, it shows that the other side of Afghanistan, the other side of the coin, but also a story of just a few people, a bunch of human beings there that have love, affection, aspirations, and big hopes like any one of us, and big lessons learned for everybody. So it should remind somebody from to their own parents, their own mother and father, anywhere in any country in the world, that how much must have their dads would have thought about them and their dedication to their kids. I would say that for me, it also has that notion look at it from that angle as well.
Well, it's an extraordinary film. It's been quite a journey for you and quite a journey for us this morning. Thank you for allowing us to show it at the festival, and best of luck for the progress of the film, and hope that it has an impact. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Shwaib.
And Shwaib, I hope you mend soon and test negative. So thank you.
Yeah, tomorrow's my last day of the quarantine. Thank you.
Okay, great. Well, I look forward that you can have a reunion.